like to welcome everyone, both here at our City Council chambers on the 12th floor of the City Administration Building, to our Solutions for a Sustainable San Diego seminar. We have this evening, for our forum, a very distinguished panel, not just of academics, but of business folks, investment specialists, environmental specialists, all of whom are deeply involved in the new enterprise that our city of San Diego and cities throughout the state of California, throughout the United States, throughout the Western Hemisphere, and really throughout the world are engaged in the same exercise. And it's a very important exercise as we transition from a growth-oriented economy to a sustainable economy. This forum is being broadcast live on Channel 24, and we're very thankful for the personnel from Channel 24 that make this possible, to bring this message to all of our friends and citizens throughout the city of San Diego. Tonight, we will demonstrate how San Diego's local economy is and can continue to benefit from the emergence of environmentally friendly technologies aimed at promoting a sustainable future and providing good jobs. And what we mean by a sustainable future is this. For many years, the city of San Diego, at least over the last 3 decades, has grown at a remarkable pace. During the mid-70s to the mid-80s, we actually grew faster than Bangladesh in San Diego. We grew all throughout the open spaces of San Diego, and that's why right now we are do not have a lot of land available for development in San Diego. And so when we say that we want to transition from a growth-based economy to a sustainable economy, what we're saying is that we have had this massive spurt of development that has outpaced the infrastructure necessary to sustain the population that we have here in San Diego. We're a unique community because we import almost 90% of the water that we drink and that we use, which is extraordinary. We're a desert community, even though it doesn't appear like we're a desert community to our visitors and to those who live here. In addition to the problems that we have with making sure we have a sufficient water supply in order to sustain the population that's here, we also have to make sure that we have an infrastructure that works, that we have the streets and the roads, that we have a source of power that's actually sustainable and doesn't degrade the air and the environment. We have to maintain a wastewater system, which is not in good shape. As I said, our streets and roads are not in good shape. Our community facilities, libraries, parks, rec centers, again, in the newer areas of our community, we're in good shape. But in the older areas, in our communities of North Park and Point Loma, in South Park, Golden Hill, South San Diego, we have very severe challenges that we have not maintained the infrastructure of our city. And so what we are about this evening is understanding how we need to make the transition to a sustainable city, to a city that relies upon alternative sources of energy, primarily solar power, for example. A city that has the capacity and, in fact, engages in recycling. You know, almost 70% of everything that we consume, that we dispose of at our waste facility, can be and should be recycled and isn't. And this is something that would allow us to make money, would extend the lifespan of our waste dump facilities, our land use facilities that are devoted to disposal of waste, and yet that hasn't happened. We're way behind. In addition, there is lurking as in the background to all of these difficulties and challenges that we're facing, two other very important realities. The first reality, which is scientific in nature, is the fact of global warming. And I think generally speaking, the scientific community of the world is committed to the idea that there is a greenhouse effect and that that greenhouse effect is having an impact on our climate conditions, and that those climate condition changes that are being brought about by the greenhouse effect because of the emissions into the atmosphere of various gases that having the effect of heating the earth, that is going to have and is having a profound impact on our climate, and that is going to affect us most immediately by helping to create these unfortunate water shortages, pardon me, as well as raising the tide at our shorelines, which will result in an erosion, more erosion. And so the city of San Diego is out on a limb as far as having been overbuilt without appropriate infrastructure. And at the same time, we're having to deal with the reality of global warming, which accentuates our vulnerable position. And the second reality I wanted to mention is that we have a system of government that has been driven, unfortunately, by the campaign contributions from our developer friends that have gone into and had a huge effect on the policy making, the decision making. The whole experience that we just went through with Sunroad really illustrates the point, where we did not comply with the safety standards based on 2 aeronautical reports. And we went through this huge ordeal in order to get compliance. Out of that, out of the awareness that San Diegans have that the system has broken down, that the system of planning, the development services, that there's been a breakdown in the entire system, out of that comes the possibility that we could actually reorganize our development services department, which too often has worked for the developers, to an environmental planning and environmental protection department that will work with the developers. And what we want to do is we don't want to lose our developers, because if we lost our developers, there would be a serious recession in San Diego. But what we want to do is try to work with our developers and change the focus from growth-oriented development to sustainability, to alternative energy, to a low-impact development system, to an infrastructure development system, to a water reuse development system. So this evening, that's what discussion is all about tonight. This isn't some theoretical plan. The men and women that are here are actually are pioneers throughout, and you will see all the things that I talked about theoretically, they actually are involved and are engaged and are making big things happen in all their respective fields. To my immediate right is Mike Calabrese, and Mike is responsible for, in the city attorney's office, recycling, waste disposal, city energy policy, the stormwater program, and the transportation infrastructure. And this is a department that we set up in the city attorney's office that never existed before in the history of the city attorney's office. And so we are, through Mike and his brilliance, really, and his leadership, and the core group of attorneys that are around him, we are deeply involved at the state level, the federal level, and to some degree the international level as it relates to Mexico, and all the things that we're talking about, making sure that the city attorney's office is doing everything possible to represent the people of San Diego's best long-term interests. Next is Dr. Lisa Schaefer. Dr. Schaefer is the executive director of the UCSD's Environment and Sustainability Initiative. For 9 years, she's been the assistant director at the Scripps Institute of Oceanography, where she has been responsible for international relations, policy programs, and building interdisciplinary programs around environmental science and policy. She's really smart. You don't get there without really being smart. Next to Lisa is Josh Gelfand. Josh is the business development manager of a car sharing company in San Diego. He's a lifelong environmentalist. He's from Los Angeles. He's educated at the University of Wisconsin, and he has come up with a number of very innovative ideas about alternative ways of getting to and from the home and work and school. You know, when I was in college, and I'm probably older than most of the people here this evening, I see a few friendly faces out there of the same vintage, but we used to hitchhike everywhere. You know, people who had a very open and sharing and compassionate attitude towards one another. There was a sense of real community. And so that's how people got around. And when I see all of these cars with just one individual in the car, you can see that part of what we have to do is we have to get used to or get away from isolating ourselves, that we're in on this thing together. And if we're going to be able to make alternative transportation work, we're going to have to learn how to share and to ride with each other. Next to Josh is Dr. Robert Wilder. And he also is another PhD. His focus is on alternative energy. He's the founder and president of the Alternative Energy Index and manager of a Clean Energy Index. Dr. Wilder is a part-time faculty member at UC San Diego. His PhD is from the University of California. And I want to say that we did not discriminate against my friends from Stanford tonight. We just couldn't find anybody from Stanford that was available. They were all on vacation. No, I'm just kidding. And he also has a law degree from the University of San Diego. Dr. Wilder and his family live in a solar-powered home in Encinitas. So he's living what he is espousing. Next to Dr. Wilder is Judith Seed. Judith, good evening. Hi. Judith is the founder and principal of a local responsible investment group. Ms. Seed actively uses socially responsible investing for her clients since 1992 and firmly believes that we can influence corporations to change their policies by avoiding investments in irresponsible companies and by seeking investments in companies with positive practices and products. There's nothing inconsistent with social responsibility and profit-taking, and over the long haul, the two go hand in hand. Next is Shane Johnson. Shane is the founder and principal of a local responsible investments group. He is a comprehensive financial planner specializing in socially responsible investments. He focuses on combining client values with winning portfolio solutions and has led dozens of workshops and seminars dealing with this approach to investment advice. And Shane was very instrumental in getting this organized tonight, and I want to thank him very much for providing the leadership to the City Attorney's Office to help us pull this together. Next to Shane is Anthony Aaron. He's with Waste Management. He's the CEO, president, and founder of a renewable energy facilities company. As the founder and one of the chief architects of the combustion technology and facility concept, he also consults on technology, environmental impact studies, and engineering issues, and he has some very important things to say about the whole renewable energy and waste management field. Next to Anthony is Mike Wiggins. Hi. Mike is a part of something that's extraordinarily important, which are green buildings, building green, low impact development. He's the chief operating officer of a green construction company in San Diego. And he very shortly will be elected president of the AGC, which we're looking forward to. I'm just kidding about that. Mr. Wiggins has 35 years experience in the construction and real estate development industries and has been involved in green building since the 70s. He has acted as either the builder, the designer, or both of numerous green projects. His early projects included passive and active solar and earth shelter designs, one of which was featured in the Mother Earth News in 1980. And then last is Claude Reichart, and he's going to be talking about water, which is my favorite topic right now. He's the founder and president of a water-saving company and a distributor of no-flush urinals. He is the inventor of this water-saving technology. The company's product is distributed in the U.S. and worldwide. He has been an active member in the plumbing code and water conservation industry for 20 years. Again, I want to thank everyone for being here, and what I'd like to start off with is to ask Lisa if she will commence our discussion. And I think you have a PowerPoint. And Lisa, why don't we move to your PowerPoint? And again, thanks everyone for being here, and our distinguished panelists and our audience, and our home audience as well. Lisa.
Okay, thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. I was asked to give an overview of sustainability and provide the big picture within which the green enterprise entrepreneurs that I have here beside me are doing their work. And my simple definition of sustainability is living as if the future matters. The official definition is meeting today's needs without compromising the ability to meet the needs of future generations. Next one, please. Human activity is having it.
Would you repeat that one more time? Meeting today's
needs without compromising the ability to meet the needs of future generations.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So human activity is having a global impact, and this slide shows the Earth at night. It's a composite of satellite pictures. In a previous life, I worked at NASA and some of these satellite programs. The white lights are electrical use primarily. They show where industrial activity is taking place. The red lights are fires. Some of them are naturally made, but many of them are set by people to clear-cut forest areas. The yellow lights up in Siberia are gas flares from gas development, and the blue lights in the oceans are both fishing boats and offshore oil and gas exploration. And the purpose of this slide is just to show that while as long as humans have been around, we've been doing things interacting with the planet, but there are so many of us doing so much that it's having an impact at a global scale. And this image also demonstrates the technological capability we have, that we can see this. We know how to understand, how to measure and monitor the impact we're having, and that's a very important tool in finding solutions and ways to live more sustainably.
Lisa, if we wanted to meet today's needs without compromising the needs of future generations, if we could go back to that earlier slide, what would that look like? I mean, tell us what that would look like as opposed to what it looks like there. What would be the state of the world and how it looks under with your vision, if your vision were achieved?
Well, the white lights of electricity use basically could be a benign activity if the sources of the energy were renewable sources. So it's hard to just go from that map to knowing how sustainable or unsustainable some of those things are.
Okay.
Certainly you wouldn't want to be flaring methane gas up into the atmosphere from oil wells and gas exploration.
And that's coming from which part of the world?
Up in Siberia, the
yellow.
To the right, yeah, the yellow up there.
So one thing we would like to do is be able to do something about that.
Well, we'd either be taking less of the fossil fuels out of the earth because we wouldn't need them, and to the extent that we were taking them out, we'd be doing it in an environmentally responsible way. So,
as an international specialist such as yourself, is there some effort being made to try to negotiate something that would do something about that problem in Siberia?
well, to the extent that countries are parties to the Kyoto Protocol, the international agreement to reduce greenhouse emissions, the protocol doesn't specify how you meet the targets of reducing greenhouse gases, but that would be a really big opportunity for an easy win.
Is Kyoto, is that the most advanced thinking? I mean, if I look at something like this, which I think is really rather brilliant on your part, if I look at something like this, is there a standard or a set of objectives that could be quantified and described that would tell us what that state of the world would look like on a map like this? In other words, would something like that be possible? I'm just thinking for purposes of the public in general, if they look at that and they see they see the world looking that way, could we describe to them what it is that we're trying to do in simple terms like you've done here?
There are maps that show the greenhouse gas emissions from each country or each region and the sources of those emissions, and you could see what it would look like as those were reduced. And the Kyoto Protocol is not the end solution. I mean, if it were fully implemented and everybody did all the right things, we still wouldn't be solving the long-term climate problem, but it's a step in a direction that we have to go at an accelerating pace.
Okay.
Okay, so we're talking about sustainability, of which climate change is one piece, but it's not the only piece. And sustainability is also about biodiversity and it's about meeting all of our needs for food and security and protecting species other than humans as well. This is a quote from E.O. Wilson. Many species are being threatened by the magnitude of human activity, and this is something that's irreversible. So we go to the next slide, please. The overall challenge, and this is sort of my global presentation of the same thing that you said in the context of San Diego. As world population stabilizes by the middle of the century, how will we feed, house, clothe, educate, and employ 9 billion people while curing hunger, poverty, and social inequity and maintaining the natural systems upon which we depend? It's not a small challenge. On the other hand, it's an opportunity, and the kinds of businesses that are in place in San Diego and that we hope to attract more of to San Diego not only contribute to making San Diego a sustainable place, but they could be the leaders in the global market in providing those technologies to meet the broader world needs. Next. So I'm from the university. I'm representing the academic sector, and traditionally academics have generated knowledge, taught students the knowledge that has been generated, and published a lot of papers and gotten tenure and lived in the ivory tower. And it's that mandate is changing, and now for sustainability what we need to do is put that information and that knowledge to work to integrate across the disciplines and be able to support decision making with information technologies, new tools, and integrated approaches, and then to keep studying things even after we've made changes to be able to do what we call adaptive management. So we try something, we keep monitoring, we learn whether it's having the desired effect, we make adjustments, and we move down a path in an iterative process.
One of the things that I was hoping along the lines that you just mentioned there that we could do is to have the University of California, the Institution of Oceanography, to help the city of San Diego redo its general plan. The general plan is the governing document that determines what development is permitted and the contours of the development, the density, the type. And right now our community plan is out of stride with everything that we're talking about right now. Is there some thought that you might be willing to play not just that role for us, but play that role for, let's say, cities and planning governmental entities, you know, and perhaps have some kind of streamlined way, perhaps a blueprint for a general plan that would allow us to take advantage of your academic and expertise?
Well, the vision that we have at UC San Diego is to create a set of institutes, a climate research institute and a sustainability solutions institute that would be able to work on specific practical problems that people bring to us. Our job is not to make the hard political decisions, but to give you the information and to do what-if scenarios, to provide projections and models and analyses so that you can say, if we modify the general plan this way, it might have these consequences, and if we did it another way, it might have other consequences. We don't want to be the ones telling you what the answer should be, but providing the knowledge so you can make good decisions.
Where are you in terms of actually having the ability to, let's say, help a city of San Diego or a county of San Diego? Where are you right now in terms of your actual capability to help?
Well, we do contracts now for the City of San Diego on specific projects. We're looking at the Point Loma wastewater treatment plant and providing some analysis to support the decision of whether or not to go for another waiver on the secondary treatment. We do studies on water quality in the Bay and other, as the city brings us specific research questions that they need help with, we do that now, and we're in discussions with the Environmental Services Department to look at a broader study. We would do with Chula Vista and also with the San Diego Foundation to do what we were calling myth busters. They get lots of solutions thrown at them. Well, everything would be great if you just changed all the traffic lights to LEDs, or if you just put in water meters or some other thing. What is the actual impact of each of those changes, and what applies in San Diego specifically? It might be great in Chicago or Boston, but does it make sense here?
I see the value of sort of having that ad hoc, project by project approach. But what I'm wondering about is, for example, would it be possible to have you at least consider putting together a model general plan, not making the hard political decisions, but just basically to help migrate the thinking of cities like San Diego, across the board, and maybe have that something that could be picked up off the computer, and you see what I'm?
Yes.
Is that something that you consider, or is that?
Yeah, and it's certainly something we would consider. It takes money to get researchers and faculty to do research stuff because they get funding from, they have other things to do with their time, and we need to put together a package with funding that would be attractive to them intellectually and allow them to support their graduate
Maybe we could just
students and so on.
negotiate that right now.
But yeah, we'd love to do it, and that's what we're there for, is to provide service. So actually that leads nicely into my next slide, which is that what we see our role is to produce new intellectual capital, to invent new technologies, to educate sustainability professionals, to promote social change, to work with the community, industry, and government, to green our own campuses so that we're practicing what we preach, to overcome our own cultural and social barriers, and to do these things fast enough to make a difference. So that's where we see our role. The next slide is my best attempt to find a picture of an ivory bridge that we want to, instead of building ivory towers, we want to build ivory bridges. And we are who we've been waiting for. There's nobody else who's going to do it if we don't. So that's what we're here for. So what I wanted to spend a minute or two about is the big picture of what is clean tech, and I guess it's probably not legible, but this is a chart from a report that was just released. The definition comes from the Clean Tech Venture Network. Clean tech is not just companies that have green buildings or that recycle a lot. It's companies that provide goods and services in new ways, that avoid environmental harm, that redress harm that's been done. And so it covers agriculture, air and environment, materials, energy, manufacturing, recycling and waste, transportation, and water. The next slide, it's not just what used to be called green tech, which was cleaning up pollution at the end of the pipeline. This is designing new ways to do things so that we don't create the pollution in the first place. Next. So UCSD's Global Connect program just completed this study of what is the clean tech sector in San Diego. This was funded by the city, and it will be, I have an electronic copy of it. It's going to be put on some city webpage, but I'm not sure exactly what day, but coming soon. You get to hear it first. The next slide, just some of the highlights. We were asked to look at what companies are in San Diego and why are they here, and we found 148 companies that met our definition of clean tech. Most of them, or the biggest selection of them, was in energy generation. The next largest groupings were in water and wastewater, energy efficiency, and recycling. We looked at the whole San Diego region, but of the 148, 89 of them are actually within the city limits. And we looked at some of the attributes San Diego has that make clean tech attractive here. And one of the big ones is a talented pool of well-trained scientists and engineers, because we have a biotech sector and we have an information technology sector and we have good universities. We also have good support mechanisms. And on the next page we have...
Can I ask you a quick question? On the 148, how does that compare, let's say, you said there's 148 clean tech companies. Mm-hmm. How does that compare, let's say, with a city like San Francisco, Los Angeles, Boston? Do you have any of that comparative information?
This report does not have that comparative information because that wasn't in the scope.
What about,
but we're not the leaders.
Where do we fall in, would you say? Where do we fall?
I don't actually know the numbers, but my impression is that San Francisco, at the Silicon Valley area, has been at this for longer than we have. But we've proposed to do that comparison next. There are a number of, in the report it does mention some other cities that we compete with for these kinds of companies.
How does California, I know you don't have the numbers, but just based upon your sense of things, how does California fit in with the rest of the country as far as?
It's a mixed bag. We have some attractive characteristics in California that make companies want to locate here, and we also have some very high costs of doing business here. So, we both encourage and discourage corporate location here.
Say we're in the middle, roughly, in terms of the rest of the country?
I don't feel comfortable really answering that because I wasn't the primary author of the study. So the answer is knowable. I just don't know it. So the summary of the report, we have venture capital available to invest in these companies. There was $1.2 billion invested in San Diego overall, not just in clean tech, but that could be directed to clean tech opportunities. We have some incentives and tax credits and other programs that make it more attractive to do this kind of work. We have a lot of natural resources here, obviously solar energy and the ocean. We're not likely to be big in the production of biofuels just because of land use and our climate. We're not going to be growing a lot of crops here.
When you say biofuels, would you just elaborate a little bit on what you mean by that?
Well, the current major biofuel activity is ethanol from corn, which doesn't make environmental sense in the first place, but we're also not likely to start growing corn in San Diego, even if it did make sense. Biofuel generically covers a lot of things, including biodiesel, which could be made from restaurant cooking oil, but it could also be made from plants that are genetically engineered specifically to produce fuel, to produce oil that can be used and converted into energy. But we might be important in the basic research that supports the development of biofuel activity where the actual cultivation might take place in a different geographic location. Okay, the next one. There's an organization called Sustain Lane that ranks different cities, not in terms of clean tech per se, but in terms of their sustainability. How well is the city positioned to be a good place to live? And we rank in this rating number 17 out of the top 50 cities in the United States. We are definitely a leader in the emerging economic realm of sustainability, they say. But if you go to the next chart, the red here is bad and green is good. So commuting, water quality, and housing affordability are the negatives in keeping us from having a higher ranking in sustainability. Our knowledge base is very good. I put a circle around that because that's my part. Green buildings is pretty good. The green economy, that we have these kind of companies, is pretty good. Solid waste diversion, and you can see the rest. So the top green city, according to this analysis, is Portland, then San Francisco, Seattle, Chicago, Oakland, New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Denver, and Minneapolis. Those are the top 10. But these problem areas are economic opportunity areas. So, you know, these problems, these opportunities are our choices and how we address them. And so I'd like to close by just saying that we have an opportunity to really make a difference, and what we do together in the next 5 to 10 years will define our future for the next 50 to 100 years and beyond. Thank you.
We're going to try. Thank you. Excellent. We're going to post, so that for the folks at home and the folks that are here, we're going to post on the city attorney's website at sandiegocityattorney.org all these presentations so you can see them on the website. And we will get a film of this entire presentation, and that also will be posted on the website in the next couple of days. Thank you. Great report. Okay. Josh?
All right. Thank you. Yeah, my name is Josh Gelfand with a local alternative transportation company, in addition to being on the San Diego Regional Sustainability Partnerships Transportation Committee. And I'm going to start actually by saying something that you probably wouldn't expect based on the nature of this panel. In the United States, our vehicles are grossly underutilized. And basically what I mean by that is, according to AAA, the average car is driven for about 66 minutes a day. What that means is that car spends 96% of its lifetime parked, doing absolutely nothing but taking up space, taking up money. There are solutions, there are alternatives, and that's basically what a lot of us are looking for right now. So basically, the company that I represent is what's referred to as a car sharing organization. And what car sharing is, it basically means members of an organization get access to a fleet of vehicles to use as needed on demand. It's basically pay-as-you-go vehicles. Where this works are denser urban areas. And what we're seeing a shift of throughout the country right now, as we see a lot of development downtown, especially here, is a re-urbanization. For the last 60 some odd years, there's been a massive suburbanization throughout this country, and people have been spending their time commuting to work and spending all that money you save on getting a nice house out in the suburbs back into the vehicle. In fact, the average household spends about 20% of its income on the vehicle, on our transportation costs. But what choices are out there? A lot of people say they don't want to take the bus, they don't want to take the trolley, it's not convenient for them. We know Southern California is both geographically and topographically challenged when it comes to public transportation.
When you say topographically, what do you mean by that?
Well, it's very hilly. It's very spread out in a sense that you can't realistically have buses and public transit options reach to every finger of every inlet where all the homes are actually located. So, but it is better than most people think. That's the other plus side of this, that public transit development is giving people options here. And so what the purpose of car sharing does is to encourage people not to drive, to get out and walk, ride a bike, carpool, vanpool, take public transit, and look for other ways of getting around. Then when you actually need a vehicle, that's when you get to use it, and that's when you want to use it, and then you don't have to worry about all the extraneous costs of spending all your money for your car to sit there. And in fact, one thing I challenge most people all the time to do, with rising gas prices, people are trying to figure out how much they spend per mile that they're driving right now. But I challenge everyone to see how much you spend per hour that you're actually driving your car. Take every penny, whether it's your monthly payment, your insurance, fuel, maintenance, parking, all those costs, down to the nice smelling pine tree you hang from your windshield, and how much are you spending per hour that you are actually in your vehicle. And you'll find that you're wasting a lot of money and wasting a lot of time. So with these other choices that are out there, people are finding more convenience in their lives. People are able to save not only money, but ultimately what car sharing has done, and many studies have been done all over the world with this, car sharing can basically remove up to 15 vehicles for every one car sharing vehicle that's out on the road. And in San Diego, there are 75 vehicles that are used for car sharing here. So basically, through that, it's effectively removed about 1,000 vehicles from the road. Now, based on that, you can extrapolate so much more positive effect. Every vehicle.
When you say 75 cars, would you explain a little bit more what you mean by that?
Well, in the car sharing organization, there are 75 vehicles available to the members to use as needed.
And how many? This is in your organization?
Correct.
And how many members do you have?
We've got over 2,000 members in San Diego alone. And it's growing tremendously, and more than doubled in 2007. So the fact is, people are looking for options. And in Southern California, we always refer to the car culture here. People really identify with their vehicles. But ultimately, that's starting to weigh heavily on people's incomes and pocketbooks. So it's time to look for these type of alternatives. So families, instead of buying a second or third vehicle, will opt for this as a backup car. Instead of buying a giant SUV that people actually use the space for once or twice a year, you get a fuel-efficient sedan for the everyday driving, and then have a backup vehicle available when it's needed. For each car, there's basically 3 parking spaces: home, work, shopping. And that's general development that happens there. So with the cars that are taken off the road through car sharing, in San Diego alone, we're looking at about 3,000 parking spots. Now go from there. Say there's 3.5 tons of concrete that goes into building every parking spot. Building a parking structure costs about $35,000 per spot. Now that's a lot of money that is saved both in the private and public sector when this is incorporated into the plan. In addition, there's the pollution side. If you consider that every vehicle gets about 25 miles to gallon, and is driven 12,000 miles a year, which is about the U.S. average, that's about, here, 9.4 million pounds of CO2 emission and over 480,000 gallons of gasoline that the program in San Diego alone has been able to accomplish. And this isn't even the biggest, not even close to the biggest car sharing city. The concept of car sharing started in Europe.
What is the largest car sharing city?
In the U.S., it's mainly San Francisco. They actually have 3 competing car sharing organizations there. But in San Francisco, you've got pretty much 1 car to every 3 people versus 3 cars to every person in Southern California, practically. So there's a big difference between Southern California and San Francisco. Again, public transit's a lot more intricate there. If SoCal stayed on pace during really the 20s with what was very advanced public transit, Los Angeles was considered to have the best public transit in the world in the 1920s. But that is not the case now, if you've been up to LA recently. So basically, as we know, public transit has been tough. So with the rising cost of this vehicle ownership, what are choices besides that? There are so many vanpool, carpool options that people can take on and have more choices available.
So a city like San Diego could adopt that type of program as part of their organizational structure.
Yeah, it's really part of it.
Have you seen that happen? Have you seen where a city, like we have this huge parking structure over here, and that's a brilliant insight on your part. You're right. People get to there and their cars sit there for 8 hours and then they go home.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right.
And so so we have a captive audience like that. If all of us could just use each other's cars,
mm-hmm.
You know, we
Yeah,
can
and
keep all
that's-
the Porsches there and get rid of everybody else's, and
And
everyone can
there
have a
are
Porsche.
ways to do that. And the fact is that's true. I mean, my organization focuses on more environmentally friendly vehicles.
I was just kidding.
But yeah, I know what you're saying. What we have actually a lot of cities and municipal agencies, federal agencies that are taking to car sharing to supplement, to augment, and even replace their fleet vehicles. City of Portland, Oregon, as we're talking about one of the most sustainable cities, is a great example. 25 city agencies have gotten rid of their fleet cars and exclusively use car sharing. And when you think about just the average vehicle gets driven for about an hour a day, maybe a fleet vehicle is driven for up to 3 hours a day tops, and that's 21 days a month, versus a car sharing vehicle that can be used 6, 7+ hours a day all the time. So the cost per hour on the vehicle is tremendously lowered, so the economic burden is lowered there. More utilization out of a resource, which our vehicles and our roads are a resource that we're abusing, as we see with all of the single operator vehicles out there during rush hour traffic.
That was really interesting.
Thank you.
Robert?
First, I'd like to thank Mike Aguirre for putting this together, bringing this event together. And everyone who was part of that. If we don't talk about this sort of thing, we'll never advance. So it's very important. I thank you for that. Okay, I'd like to talk about some conventional wisdom about energy that I know is wrong. There's myths out there for us in San Diego, nationally, globally. Myth number one is that we can't power our homes with renewable energy here in San Diego. Well, I have at my house a 6-kilowatt solar power system, and we live large. We live great. We live in Encinitas. My kids, my wife can tell you, we've got the big screen TVs, we've got the computers. We don't give up anything. You talked about my being in a solar-powered home, and I want to convey to people that I give up nothing. You know, by being solar-powered, it's not as if I'm being miserly in some way. We do everything. And we've had it for 4 years, which means that in about another 4 years, all of our electricity is free. All of our electricity is free. Say that twice. Because all of you pay utility bills typically, assuming you're not solar-powered. And when those utility bills change, when the utility changes its cost structure, usually it's one direction. They're charging more. We don't have that. We have a fixed cost. So it's a myth that we can't be renewable, whether it's large wind turbines in the desert or small solar panels at my house or concentrating solar. San Diego County, the whole region, and neighboring counties as well, in the desert especially, have enormous resources for renewables. So we can bring it in at a low cost, maybe 5-10 cents a kilowatt hour, or we could make it in our houses, like here in San Diego as we do, for roughly 20 cents a kilowatt hour. But that's competing with what we pay, the local utilities. So it's not just that. You know, I love to go fast. We're just talking about cars. I love fast cars. Within the year, I'm going to have 2 fast cars. They are not slow like a gasoline-powered car. They're not smelly like a gasoline-powered car. They don't require all the maintenance and the oil changes of a gasoline-powered car. They're solar-powered. 0 to 60 in 4 seconds. I want to emphasize, I'm giving up nothing. 0 to 60 in 4 seconds. It's not slow like my brother's Porsche. I just don't have those problems. So this is real. I think there's a myth that we can't do this, and I'm just here to tell you we're going to have this car. We're going to have a second one, which is a plug-in hybrid. Here in San Diego, we can take the car itself is basically a large battery with 4 wheels around it, and if we're parking it during the day, we can plug it into the house or to the building, and we can put that electricity into the building, which is what we'll have with this plug-in hybrid car. Will be done soon. And the point is, if we're getting our electricity at a cheap time of day, if the city needs it, if the county of San Diego needs it, if the utility needs power during these peak hours, these cars all throughout our area could be putting juice into the grid. It's
Can I
called
ask
V2G.
this question? Let's put both these ideas together. Could you have alternative energy-powered automobiles and have sharing at the same time, or is that inconsistent?
Yeah, you absolutely could. The sharing idea is...
technically explain how that would work. If you have to plug it in, try to explain how that would work to us.
Well, we'll do this. We'll tag team
Okay.
here. So let me first do the mechanics of it. we've been told a lie, basically. We've been all told a lie for years and years, which the electric cars, you got to push them up hills, they're slow. It's not true. So the car itself can be quite fast. The thing is, you don't need to plug it in. You don't need to have it sit there during the day to power the grid. You can car share it. The point of my seat, where I'm saying is, the gasoline, we sort of assume it's always going to be there, the oil, it won't. And I'm using solar power at my house to power my car. No terrorist can stop that. No hurricane can affect me. My electricity, my juice for my car, in essence, my fuel is free. The car sharing part works entirely in tandem with that. We were just chatting about biodiesel powered vehicles could do this, hybrids.
That's right, but what the toughest part that we're facing right now is obviously the infrastructure. Every parking spot in the city doesn't have an outlet, and so if the vehicles are getting used 6-7 hours a day, there needs to be a strong infrastructure in place for this. If we wanted to use alternative fuels, be it biodiesel, ethanol, or anything else that's available out there, car sharing relies on membership to fill up the vehicles at times. So the infrastructure is vital. It all has to work together, and it can work.
And see, what's interesting, I think, and exciting about that is that then creates job opportunities and economic opportunities to retool and rebuild the infrastructure and to work with a place like UCSD to help us think through, the sequencing and all the complexities.
Actually, that's a very good point. This brings me to my second myth. When I was teaching for many years. I was assistant professor at the university in that ivory tower, and I crossed that bridge, which didn't exist yet. I wish that bridge had been there. I left the ivory tower because I was so frustrated because these things are real, and we weren't doing them. They weren't being done. So I went out into the world, so to speak, and did this. 3 years ago, we started a clean energy index, and I just wanted to relate to you folks that 3 years ago today's our 3-year anniversary, it's up 75%, the index. Now, it's based around all these clean energy technologies, and the best way to sort of gauge interest is, I'll tell you, when we started this, I would have been happy if we were at 50 million. That sounded like a lot of money to me, or 75 million, but now we're at over $1 billion, and it's real. This is people's money. $1 billion of anything, bars of surf wax, burgers, is a lot. It's just a big number. And my wife can tell you it's way beyond what I expected. And I think the point of this is people are voting with their wallets. Their most precious thing besides their family, their kids, their pets, et cetera, is their money, their dollars. And so we're at I'd say the fund that tracks it over $1 billion in size. So, this idea that it can create jobs, I think is very real. Now, to be sure, there are losers. Part of the reason this is a myth is that there are going to be losers. The coal industry, the oil industry, the natural gas industry, to some extent will be losers in this game that I'm talking to you about. And I think they've done a fairly exceptional job of pointing out the downsides. But what has not been heard, the voice that hasn't been out there to this day, but will be very soon, are this idea of plug-in hybrid cars. And the city can do all sorts of things. It's not just states or nations that can incentivize. I wouldn't mind free parking for electric vehicles throughout the city. Wouldn't bother me.
And put the solar panels on the roofs of all the parking structures to generate the electricity to power the hybrid.
Yeah, you see, the thing is, this is becoming possible. Just a couple years ago, it wouldn't have been, because solar power was $5, $10 a watt. But as it comes down to $4 a watt, and it's subsidized, my solar system at my house, half was paid for by the state. So it was a $30,000 system. I paid $15,000, which is about 8 years of electric bills. I'm about 4 years into it. In 4 years, I paid it back.
Is that program still available?
Yes, it is. But what's happening is the dollars are coming down. The governor's actually been quite good. The governor has been pushing this with a million solar roofs program. There's been some growing pains in terms of implementing the program. I could go way into it. I would bore you. But California, you asked how we rate to other places, and I'd say that California among the states is doing quite good. New England's doing quite good. We're not where we need to be. We're not where we should be. We're certainly behind Germany, and we're behind Japan, and we shouldn't be. But it's just getting into skulls of people now, of our leaders, that it creates jobs. And these are good-paying jobs. These are not, McJobs that aren't good. These are good-paying jobs that are in the renewables industry and energy efficiency as well. I mean, I'm looking around, I'm seeing huge Saudi Arabia-sized oil reserves of energy efficiency that we're not doing here. that we could be doing. So here in San Diego, and every time the city of San Diego is going to buy a vehicle, you know, if there's going to be in a year or 2 or 3 years, these electric vehicles, I won't mention the company's names, but they're going to come. Why wouldn't the low-cost ones be bought? You know, these electric vehicles, especially if they're returning, to a central maintenance facility where they can be recharged, or certainly, you know, plug-in hybrids if you've got to use fossil fuels. You know, I'm not sure.
I'll make sure as we go through our budget next year that we'll make sure. In fact, we'll do something starting tomorrow. That's an excellent idea in terms of our fleet. That's an excellent idea. We'll try to do everything we can to get something going in that area.
Well, we need more of you. We need to clone you. I appreciate that.
There's a few people would like to do something to me, but normally it's not clone me. I can tell you that.
Well, I'm not sure how much longer I can. How about one more minute? I don't want to go over time. You know, another thing is that we have this myth that the oil will always be there, whether it's San Diego or Tacoma or Cleveland. The fact is we're using now about 86 million barrels a day, and it's entirely unclear that we can, in fact, ramp as India and China move into the story. You know, oil, again, I don't think it's going back to $40 a barrel, $20 a barrel. You know, I don't know where it's going to go, but I have a feeling with the increasing demand and a constricting supply, at some point we are going to have a peak oil issue. We are going to have an issue where countries that don't particularly like us, maybe Venezuela wants to send their oil to China. Maybe, you know, Russia, countries that supply natural gas, there may be geopolitical issues. So we are all on an energy security fragile point. And, you know, I think of San Diego as sort of a defense, very strongly defense-oriented community. And traditionally defense, I think of the aircraft carriers, defense has meant a certain kind of threat, Al-Qaeda, terrorism. But, you know, as I look down the road, I think about my kids, hopefully my grandkids. Kids, you hear that? You know, I just would rather us be independent. And like I said, you know, the sun that hits my roof and powers my house, powers my cars, no hurricane can stop it. No terrorist event, and this is putting entirely aside climate change, which is a whole, you know, adds a whole new complexion to this. So I better stop there. But thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Excellent. Judith and Shane are going to put their presentation together.
Thanks, Mike, and I'll reiterate what Rob said. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and I do think it's important that we talk about these issues. To sort of set some context on what Judy and I will talk about, it's not necessarily the first thing that comes to people's minds when we think about the issues of sustainability and the ecological challenges that we're facing. The idea of finance or the economy probably, you know, isn't the first thing that pops up. Things like energy or transportation or green building might be more on the forefront of the mind, but this slide here, this introduction, kind of shows, I think some of you might have seen this before. It's in a very famous presentation that's won some Academy Awards, but it is one of the things that we point out about this slide is it's a false representation of reality, really. It's kind of making us choose between one or the other, right? The planet Earth or the gold bars. And what everybody is up here to talk about is, you know, actually making gold bars off of being good to the Earth. And that's a really important concept, I think. Rob, you mentioned it's just getting through the skulls of people. And at one point I was asked to define what is sustainability. And the first thing that came to my mind was really it's about focusing on long-term profits rather than short-term returns. And maybe that came to mind because of my financial perspective. But the more I thought about it, the more I believed myself. That makes a lot of sense. And if you think about the economic system, and one of the main purposes of the economic system is to measure the success or the growth of our economy, of our society. And as a measurement of success in relation to sustainability, we have to ask ourselves, is it measuring the sustainable success or progress of our society? And what we're going to talk about is responsible investing or sustainable investing. It's got a lot of names, green investing, socially responsible investing, but really the concept behind it is the same. And from a system-wide perspective, that is what it's about. It's about sustainably measuring the success of our societies. And from a personal perspective, it's more about contributing to and profiting from industries that are creating a sustainable society. So for example, in January, the LA Times ran an article on the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I don't know if some of you were familiar with what happened. Basically, the LA Times did an analysis of the $32 billion foundation. It's the largest foundation in the history of mankind. And what they found was that over 41% of the investments of that $32 billion foundation were invested in companies that were causing negative social and environmental impacts on the world directly opposite to the positive benefits that the foundation was set up to produce in the world. So sort of like shooting themselves in the foot. So part of this having to choose between one or the other is that when we get rid of that concept and we say, wow, we can do both, we see that there's more efficiency in the foundations and in the businesses that we're putting together, because it's not an if or that, it's an and, right, putting it all together. And it's not a concept that's new. It has gained a lot of attention the last couple of years with climate change, and with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation was a big news piece. But it's something that's been around for a really long time.
Which brings us to our next slide. So I'm going to talk about the history of socially responsible investing, or the history of responsible investing. And I want to thank also, in addition to Mike, everybody who came here tonight. I really think it shows a commitment to our city, and I hope that everybody leaves here and goes out and spreads the word to everybody else that there's going to be a paradigm shift, or there is already a paradigm shift about the choices that we make. And so the history of responsible investing, this, even though a lot of you may think this is relatively new, it is not. When I started in the industry about 15 years ago, I said, wow, responsible investing. You mean you can make a choice about where you put your money? That was really new to me 15 years ago. And now you see it in practically every major magazine. At the time, there were maybe 8 to 10 mutual funds that had social screens or responsible screening criteria. But responsible investing really started way back in the 1700s with religious organizations who did not want their money to be in conflict with their values. So primarily the Quakers, the Jews, and the Methodists, and then the Christians. In fact, the longest running mutual fund that is socially screened started in 1928. So what is that? Almost 80 years old. So this is not new. And that fund is still around. It was one of the pioneering funds of responsible investing. But it just simply screens for alcohol, tobacco, and gambling. We don't really consider that a completely responsible fund today, where you might be screening for all sorts of other issues, such as labor, environmental issues, minority issues, CEO, executive pay, all sorts of issues that you can think about. What would a responsible company do? However, in the 70s and 80s, apartheid really brought responsible investing to the forefront. The fact that people didn't want to be invested in companies that were doing business in South Africa to help end apartheid, and that was a very successful campaign, and responsible investing got more popular or more visible, so to speak. In the 90s, when I started in the industry, tobacco stocks, divesting from tobacco, was a very big push, and the American Medical Association made a call to divest from tobacco stocks, and pension funds and city government and mutual funds started divesting from tobacco stocks. And then in 2000 market downturn, partially pushed by corporate irresponsibility, such as the big Enron scandal and whatnot, people didn't want to be invested in companies that were irresponsible financially. In fact, during that time, very interesting statistic up here on the slide, you're going to see that there were about $10.5 billion outflow of mutual funds during the stock market downturn, the 3 years of the downturn in the stock market. But responsible investment funds actually had inflows during that same period of time. So that tells you there's been some change. And then in addition, we have some statistics from our nonprofit trade organization, the Social Investment Forum, based out of Washington, D.C. There is a whole industry of responsible investing. In fact, the Social Investment Forum puts on a conference every year called the SRI in the Rockies Conference. But they calculated in their last study that $2.29 trillion dollars are now invested with screens, which is about 1 out of every $10 in the U.S.
And where is that conference? So would you mention that conference name again?
That's SRI in the Rockies, and you can go to srintherockies.com if you're interested in that industry conference. So that's put on by the nonprofit Social Investment Forum. And so this next slide is kind of a illustration so that we can talk about the fact that responsible investing does not necessarily just mean investing in particular companies that you want to support or divesting from companies you don't want to support. There's actually 3 parts of responsible investing. One is the screening, and that's what most people think about. But 2 other very important parts are community investing. In fact, the Grameen Bank out of Bangladesh, which was started by Muhammad Yunus, he was the winner of the Nobel Peace Prize for community investing. And community investing is one of our largest growing parts of responsible investing now. But one of the most important parts is shareholder advocacy. People who own stocks. I mean, you have to do something with your money. You got to put it somewhere. If you put it in a bank, because you want to buy a CD, well, you could put it in a community investment bank. If you buy stocks with it, well, then you're a stockholder. So you actually have share ownership of a company. You have shareholder rights by owning those shares of stock. And shareholder advocacy means that you have the power to go to the annual shareholder meetings and file shareholder resolutions, which is basically asking the company to change their policies and practices. You vote your proxies when they come in, and you can vote for or against shareholder resolutions that have been filed. And so this is a very, very powerful tool that responsible investors are utilizing and having some great successes at. And this is getting to be a very, very important part of responsible investing. And I think Shane has a couple examples for us.
Yeah, so with $2.3 trillion plus dollars behind the responsible investment industry, there have been some successes. For example, this last year, climate change was a big issue. So we saw a lot of share owners filing resolutions with companies asking them to disclose their greenhouse gas emissions. And some of the oil companies, larger oil companies that were asked to create those kinds of reports were very cooperative and in fact said, yes, not only will we produce a report, but we will try to produce some benchmarks that we can mitigate our greenhouse gas emissions over a set period of time. And there were other large oil companies that refused to produce that kind of report. And then after the resolution is filed, if the company refuses to acknowledge it or negotiate terms that the share owners are okay with, it goes to vote. And what we saw this last year was actually the most profitable company in the U.S. had the largest percent shareholder agreement to actually produce that kind of report in the history. It was 41% of the share owners said, yes, we do want to see that report. So there's some real acknowledgement that these risks of doing business are important, and not only are they important because for moral reasons, but they actually can affect the company's bottom line. So as shareholders, we need to know about that. There was another company that was in the apparel industry that today, actually, it just came out with the 3rd annual report, sustainability report is what they call them. And this apparel company, I don't know if anybody here knows about the apparel industry. In general, it has a very difficult time with sweatshop labor. And the reason is because they will subcontract out the production of clothing materials so many layers down, they don't even know where it's really getting produced. So this apparel company, publicly traded company, agreed 3 years ago to start producing a report on all of the labor standards and all of their subcontractors around the world, and they're a major apparel company. So for them to do that openly and willingly was a huge victory. And today they came out, like I said, with their 3rd report showing a lot of progress in helping to increase the working conditions and stuff. So that's the shareholder action part, and putting influence on companies to act in a more sustainable way. The way that works, though, is it's like any investment process, which I'll show you right now. If you just click the button a couple of times, you can see that investors, to conceptualize this, go to investment managers who then put together a portfolio, and that portfolio goes up and down, a lot like the market did today. The way they put together that portfolio and picking stocks to go in there is they're going to do a quantitative analysis of all the companies. They're going to look at their cash flow and their price to earnings, et cetera. They're going to do a second layer of analysis after they're done with that and they've gotten rid of some poor financial companies. They're going to do a qualitative analysis. So they're going to look at the managers, they're going to look at the business plan, the patents pending, the research. So more of the soft side of business, not so number crunching. But when they're done with that, they'll have a portfolio together, and you, an investor, will be happily invested in the right companies. The responsible investment process is very similar. They're going to do a quantitative analysis first to pick the best, most financially sound companies. They're going to do that same qualitative analysis, but then there's going to be a third qualitative overlay. So out of the companies that are remaining, they're going to say which one of these has the best corporate governance practices, which ones have the best reputation in their communities, which ones have the best environmental practices. So it's also called best-in-class investing, because what you end up with are the most environmentally and socially responsible companies in your portfolio. And what also results from that is that you're mitigating a lot of risk. For example, climate change is just one responsible investment issue. It's the issue of our time, and perhaps maybe the biggest issue that humankind has ever faced. I don't know if I am able to say that, but it's a big, I don't mean to downplay it. It's important, but it is just one issue, and it brings up a lot of risks. If you're doing business in today's environment, you have to pay attention to physical risks of doing business, hurricanes and outlandish weather environments that we can't predict as accurately anymore, floods, rising tides. These things, if you have operations on the coastline, they actually produce a physical risk, as we saw with Hurricane Katrina. The regulatory risk, more and more regulations are being passed to put limits on greenhouse gas emissions. We have AB 32 in California. If you're a company that's not paying attention to the potential regulations coming down the pipeline, you are exposed to more risk than a company that's more progressive and actually getting ahead of the curve. Litigation risk, again, with Katrina, we saw a lot of shareholders suing companies that weren't properly prepared for the risk of a hurricane, and therefore they lost a lot of money with companies that did business in New Orleans. So there's litigation risk, there's competitive risk. Obviously, if consumer decisions continue to go more towards favoring green companies, companies that have these reputations for not being green or not being socially responsible, are going to lose out on revenue sharing, on revenue in the marketplace. So those are some of the risks, but of course, as Lisa pointed out earlier, this produce a lot of opportunities. And the energy sector, the transportation sector, food sector is something we don't have represented on the panel today, but the organic food industry has grown 20% a year for the last 2 decades. A lot of people don't know that 70% of nitrous oxide emitted in the U.S. comes from the agricultural sector, which is also a greenhouse gas. Green building forecast to grow at 40% a year up until 2010, and by 2010, McGraw-Hill predicts that almost half of the homes will be built with some kind of green, solar panel or some kind of greening to them. So there's a lot of opportunities as an investor. And so in a nutshell, you could say that responsible investing avoids companies that expose themselves to unnecessary risks, such as having poor environmental standards or creating unfavorable consumer perspectives due to poor social relations or labor standards. And it's going to seek out companies that have a long-term view on sustainable profits, such as those that, again, have above regulation standards or staying ahead of the curve, and in effect the risk gets lowered by choosing more responsible and stable companies.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Go right ahead.
We're just going to
One more.
finish
One
up.
more.
One more slide.
Hey, you can keep going. I love this. This is
Couple more
wonderful.
slides.
Please.
This is an important part because just as Rob Wilder stated, there were some myths or still exist myths about what you can do with alternative energy. There has been a very big myth about social investing or responsible investing and its performance. There's this thing we call the performance myth. And so in 1990, this is a graph, what you see here in this slide, of an index that was started way back in 1990 to give a very disciplined approach to calculating if that myth is true. And so what was done, most people have heard of the S&P 500 as an indicator of the stock market, the largest 500 corporations, weighted by category. And so a research firm called Kinder, Leidenberg and Dominy started the Dominy 400, where they weeded out the most egregious corporations. They were left with 250 and then added back in another 150 to weight in the right categories. And they tracked it. And they track the stock prices, and you can see the graph here speaks for itself, and this is updated through April. So, what we always have believed just makes perfect sense about good business should equal good performance over the long run, because you're cutting down your risks of lawsuits, clean up toxic waste sites. If they're dumping, someday that's going to cost them to clean up. So this is what we're seeing now, and there are a lot of other studies. There are some websites we're going to give you at the end if you're interested in looking up those studies yourselves, but it used to be that people would come to me and say, Judy, I don't care if I make less money. I just don't want to be supporting companies that aren't going to leave a good world for my children. What do we want to leave for our kids? And I would say, well, it doesn't make sense. You shouldn't have to make less. I don't think that'll happen. And so now over time we see that that's the case. And that's a myth that is starting to go away. And this next slide is just an indication of one of the largest sectors, the fastest growing, should I say, sectors of responsible investing, community investing. And again, I spoke a little bit about community investing earlier, but there's a lot of banks out there you can put your money with, and some of them are doing things that you might not be very happy with. Predatory lending practices where they go out and target low-income areas with high interest rate loans, whereas community lending is recycling money within the community, giving loans to maybe disadvantaged communities. And so those are our website links to a bunch of resources if anybody's interested. So thank you all for
Thank
listening.
you. That will be, thank you very much.
I'm-
Again, that will all be on the city attorney's website. You can get that at sandiegocityattorney.org. That all these PowerPoints will be posted, as well as this film of tonight's session. Let's go on to Anthony, and Anthony, talk to us about waste management.
Michael, thanks for inviting me to be on the panel. Shane, thank you very much. I was asked to speak about waste management this evening. And in short, waste management means maximize the use of a resource. And it doesn't necessarily have to mean the garbage. In the case of photovoltaics, it's maximize use of silicon.
What's photovoltaic?
Solar power. How do you convert sunlight to electricity? In our community, in the county of San Diego, we have right now about 5.5 million tons of what's called municipal solid waste goes into our landfills. We recycle. In North County where I live, I have a blue bin, and I have a green bin, and then I have a trash can. And in most of California, the state has implemented this through the Integrated Waste Management Board starting in the late 80s. The program's worked really, really well. And what it has allowed us to do as an industry, whether it is a waste disposal industry, an energy industry, a transportation industry, is to look at another resource that's been made available that wasn't there 20 years ago. The slide here talks about U.S. waste and recovery. And since the early 80s, when recycling really kicked in, if you can see the graph up close, what it says is over the last 20 years, we have continued to put about 160 million tons annually of garbage in the ground. During this time, the number of landfills that we have that we're putting this garbage in the ground has cut by a factor of 10. The per capita amount of trash that we make has stayed relatively the same, but there's more of us. So you have more stuff to go away, and less places for it to go away too. And the effect of recycling in our country, which is actually better than that of Europe, has been to tread water. We got about the same amount of stuff going in the ground this year as we did 20 years ago. From our industry's perspective, That's a travesty to let that go. Next slide, please. If you look at what our federal government has done over the last 40 years, in the anticipation of the Clean Air Act, in the anticipation of some of the ratcheting down of environmental standards that are out there right now, things that challenge the coal industry, things that challenge the auto industry, things that challenge the plastics industry. This is basically a graph that makes a pretty picture out of a whole lot of things. You have different ways of creating energy from waste streams. Wood waste is the one that's depicted here, but it applies to plastics and paper and food, oil, auto fluff, fiberglass, all kinds of things. We are a carbon-based society. We're a carbon-based life form, and anything that has carbon in it is an energy source. And so I would pose the question is, why do we let this go away? What this chart from NREL, or National Research Energy Labs, points out is there are several conventional ways that we as a society use energy. We burn it to make heat. We run it in an internal combustion engine to make a car go. We make steam out of it to spin turbines, to spin generators, to make electricity so the lights come on. And there's several advanced methodologies that are there that you've heard descriptions of, plasma arc technology and lasers, things like that. The bottom line is all of these things have evolved, and we're allowing one resource to go by unchecked, and that is the waste stream. Next slide, please. The American Council on Renewable Energy held a conference here 2 months ago back in New York, and they talked about the potential renewable energy outlook of America. Now, at this time, our nation is at war. The Department of Energy has said on many occasions, energy independence for our country is a matter of national security. So waste management, your recycling, taking out the garbage, is part of this, and we're forgetting this. And there's an entirely new industry that has erupted in our country, primarily from small companies, that cannot gain the attention of the types of funds that have been described here by the other panel members. But it's erupting anyhow because there's huge profits in it. To make electricity versus making a biofuel, not a fuel made from a plant, not a fuel made from cooking grease, but a fuel made from carbon dioxide, greenhouse gases. That industry has not been talked about. And the waste stream of our country could provide roughly 30% of the liquid fuel needs of our nation, getting rid of the garbage, and make, I don't know, 8, 10, 12% of the electrical needs that we need in the country. This is the industry my company is involved in, and there are many other companies like us across the country that are pursuing these avenues. They are not conventional concepts. Anti-global warming, I can take a greenhouse gas and I can pour it back in my tank in my car. I've been told since the 50s this can't be done, yet it's done every day in an oil refinery. Carbon dioxide plus water makes methane gas plus more water, with a little bit of heat and a little bit of pressure. And the argument has always been, well, it takes more energy to get it out, into the tank than I'm going to get out of it when I use it. That is the ethanol argument. It takes more natural gas heat to make ethanol cooking corn than I get out of the ethanol when I put it in my gasoline. But if there's a way to use a waste stream that is just heating up a landfill to generate that same thermal energy to process the same corn or other feedstocks that are available, and garbage is one of them, suddenly your cost of making those fuels drops to something like 30 cents a gallon. And I know I drive a 4-ton turbo diesel truck, and I get 21 miles a gallon out of it, driving like a mad fiend down the road. But I'm paying $3 and something for a gallon of diesel that I know can be made by recycling the garbage for 30 cents. So in context, this industry is erupting underneath our feet that we are totally, as a society, unaware of, that could answer a lot of these types of issues, and it's only one part of the solution. Everything you've heard up here on these discussions is part of the solution. And the challenge that we have as an industry is that people tend to look for the silver bullet, and the silver bullet is an integrated plan. And what you've started here is the beginning of a dialogue between industry, city, and the public of being able to generate that integrated plan. I would suspect, and I would challenge you in our legal system, which is a combative system, I'm going to challenge you, Mr. City Attorney, to dig a little bit deeper into these types of industries, and I suspect that you'll be shocked with what you find is out there within the walls of this county and within the walls of your city that has not been discussed yet. And prior to me getting up here and saying this tonight, you had no clue, I'm hoping, that, you know, you could take carbon dioxide and pour it back in your gas tank economically. Many of these types of things that we've been taught as a society, many of the things that I was taught in college, were a particular point of view. And when you step out of the box, in San Diego County and the city of San Diego house companies that are famous for this, stepping out of the box and looking at the problem another way. Funds to invest in conscientious companies was never thought of 20, 30, 40 years ago, not to any great extent. We walked Wall Street a couple of months ago in our efforts for our company, and I was amazed on how asleep Wall Street is to this. This effort truly is homegrown. It is truly a domestic resource, and it is going like wildfire, and everybody's missing it. It's so much fun to be involved in it because when we do get the chance, and I will say this, they don't let me out of the box very often. When we do get the chance to go out and show people what we're doing, they're absolutely shocked that this can go on. And they ask the question, why wasn't this done before? If it's so simple, why wasn't it done before? I would ask every panel member to answer that very question. Why hasn't vehicle sharing been done before? And the answer is that we didn't need to do it before, but we need to do it now. And I think you will find as you go forward and you look at the garbage that you take out tomorrow and think about, well, yesterday I thought it was going to a landfill, and today I think it might be going to a gas station or something along those lines. Think of the possibilities. And when you hear someone, a waste hauling company or a city that asks you to engage in something that, yeah, it does cause you a little bit of time to go out and do, and it does maybe cost you an extra 10 minutes out of your week to sort cans or something like that. Think about what it can do and ask them, what more can they do? And in our industry, it's been that very aspect that's fueled all of this to go on. In closing, I'm not known for necessarily short presentations in the technical world, but the bottom line is this is here, this is now, and it's going on. And we hope that you, our industry hopes that you, the public, will encourage the city to pursue these types of discussions many, many more times into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Anthony. And of course, one way we are trying to do that is to get the recycling ordinance. We don't call it mandatory recycling anymore, but we left it because it's going to be required recycling. But we need to get our recycling going in San Diego for the very reasons that you're talking about, because we could cut back tremendously on the gobbling up of our open space or limited open space. Mike, talk to us about green buildings.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Aguirre, for hosting this event. I think it's very exciting to see this type of forum in a city venue, and also thanks to Shane for his efforts in putting it together, and probably more so than that, thanks to the audience for taking the time out to, for caring enough about sustainability issues to be here tonight. I think it's really remarkable. 10 years ago, we never would have seen this type of turnout for an event of this type, and it just shows how the issues around global warming and sustainability have really come to the public consciousness in a way that people are interested enough to do something about it. So I'm here to talk about green building construction, and it really applies to all of the types of buildings that we occupy, the offices that we work in, the homes that we live in, the factories that produce the goods that we use. And green building principles can be applied to all of those types of structures. The U.S. Green Building Council recently, and the U.S. Green Building Council, for those of you who are not aware of it, is one of the lead organizations in the push for sustainable building construction. They've recently published statistics indicating that the building sector is responsible for close to 50% of all greenhouse gas emissions in this country. The industry is also responsible for the consumption of very significant quantities of our natural resources, both renewable and non-renewable. So in a sense, the building sector could be considered a culprit in the sustainability issue, but in the same sense, it can be considered an area where there's the most potential for improvement. And since it is such a significant contributor, there's relatively minor improvements in green building construction can have significant impacts on reduction of global warming issues and also preservation of renewable material or non-renewable materials. If you could switch back to the previous slide. This was, on the screen up here, it's a little bit hard to tell how green this is, but this is kind of a reference to the Emerald City from the Wizard of Oz. And the lead line here is what is green building construction. And it's not the Emerald City. And next slide, please. And it's probably not taking leafy green material and smashing it into panels and building buildings out of it, but although I wouldn't exclude that as a possibility. What green building construction is really it really runs a pretty wide gamut of issues, which includes designs that conserve energy, designs that include the use of rapidly renewable resources so they're not depleting items like old-growth redwood trees that take a long time to grow. It's the use of non-toxic materials to create clean indoor air environments. It includes use of natural ventilation, water conservation methods, daylighting techniques. It takes into account relationship to public transportation and other things that affect that affect the environment in general. There is not a one-size-fits-all approach that can be used for this. The solutions for all buildings are different. We can't give a prescribed method of turning a building into a green building. It really takes intelligent thought and planning, and the solutions are different for every building, for every site. The solutions depend on the climate that the building is being built in, relationship to locally produced building materials, and a myriad of other things. The green building construction also has to consider the needs of the user, which is obviously different with different buildings. And the slide that you see up here now, the money bag, is intended to illustrate one of the big myths around green building construction, which is that green building construction costs a lot of money. And really that's one of the things that has held the sustainable construction back over the years is the general impression in the public that it's going to cost them a lot of money to build green. And the fact is that it's just not true. The biggest part of building green is doing a little bit of advanced planning and thinking about how the construction of the building is going to affect the environment. Simple things like how the building is oriented to either take advantage of solar heat gain where it's desirable, or to avoid solar heat gain where it's not desirable. Simple things like how the rainwater runoff is handled that falls on the building site. A lot of these things can be done with absolutely no additional cost, and the fact that it's now in the public consciousness to a much greater degree, as indicated by the attendance at this this meeting is causing the manufacturers of products to take notice, and we're now getting a lot more mass-produced products that can be used in the building business that are environmentally conscious materials that cost little or no more than the materials that they're replacing.
Mike, what can we do as a city government, to help induce even a greater commitment in our city from our builders to commit to green building?
Well, there are a lot of things that other cities around the country have done. Some of those include mandating green construction for public buildings that are built. I think that that's probably a good move. I think that forums like this probably have as much or more impact than anything else. I think the most important thing for promoting green building construction is just raising the public's awareness of the issues.
What about the industry itself? Is there a great deal of resistance? Is there openness to it?
I think, the building industry and the building and the design industries are very much like most other industries. They tend to resist change, and the people, I've been in this business for 30 years, and I acquired a certain set of tools when I entered the business. I was taught to do things in a certain way, and unless I think about it in a very serious way, my tendency and the tendency of most of the other people in this business are to rely on the tools that they have, the tools that they've been taught. And so, so yes, there is resistance to change in the industry, but I don't think it's not really a logical resistance. It's a resistance because of lack of knowledge.
Is there a method or a way that our builders can bring themselves up to speed in San Diego that you can recommend?
Well, I would certainly, one recommendation would be to get involved in organizations like the U.S. Green Building Council, and there are numerous other organizations. I think some of the panelists were talking before the start of this event that almost on a daily basis we see emails from new organizations that are springing up that are related to sustainability in some way, and a lot of them are building trades oriented groups. So it's at this point it's almost impossible to. I think you almost have to consciously avoid it to stay out of green building construction if you're in this business. It's so prolific, and I think it's an indication of big changes that are on the horizon. So I think the other thing though to consider is that homeowners and building owners tend to rely on the expertise of their design and building professionals, and I don't think they can assume that expertise is there when it comes to sustainability. I think that owners need to take the initiative themselves and insist that all the avenues are at least explored as far as green construction for their building.
How can they, if they want to go green construction, how can they do that?
Well, one of the ways is to ask the people that they're dealing with, their builders and architects, to consider green construction in their design of their structures. But there are also a lot of organizations out there. The U.S. Green Building Council is one of them, and certainly anybody that is interested in sustainable construction can call up the local San Diego chapter of the USGBC, and they'll be happy to refer them to all sorts of industry experts that can help them with that process. Another organization that's useful is SDG&E. They have no-cost programs available that intend to promote energy conservation and construction of buildings, and they'll provide engineering expertise at absolutely no cost to building owners. Just another, we talked about the myth of sustainable construction being a high-cost proposition. And another one of the myths that I think is interesting is that people tend to think that green building construction is a highly technical thing. That and it can appear so when you get into photovoltaics and that sort of thing, but most of green building construction, most of the principles involved in green building construction are pretty basic, and in some cases we're actually going back to processes and methodologies for building construction that existed centuries ago. It's only been in recent years that we've become, with the advent of cheap fossil fuels, that we've become so highly dependent on fully conditioned spaces and hermetically sealed buildings. And so it's a lot of green construction is just going back to some of the old methods, the tried and true methods that worked before when we didn't have that supply of cheap energy. So those are, I think it's very important to recognize that green building can be very simple, and it's really just a matter of thinking about what we're building, and not assuming that the way it's been done for the last 30 years or so is the right way to do it. In closing, I'd like to just re-emphasize that I think that the mechanism for change is really the people like the people that are in this audience, and while government agencies certainly play a large role, the people who elect those agencies are the voters and the consumers of products, and that's where I think the change originates from, and I think it really, to a large degree, has to be a word of mouth kind of collective consciousness sort of thing that promotes change en masse, and I think that this is part of that process.
Thank you very much. I know just after listening to everyone so far that it's hard not to feel a sense of encouragement and a sense of hope, and not just hope, but I would say confidence that we really are on the right track. Klaus is going to talk about water, and I just want to tell the people of San Diego that are listening in that one of the things that we really have to recognize is that there is going to be a high likelihood that there's going to be a water shortage in San Diego. We already know that. We can see that coming. And what we need to realize is that water for us, the reuse of water, is going to become, in my judgment, a security issue. And so whether it's desalinization or whether it's coming up and making use of the advanced technologies that we now have to take our water supply back from whatever uses that it's put to, and to recycle it and get it back into a form that is better than what the water supply is now, is something that we can clearly do. It's going to take some money, but if we're going to live in San Diego and sustain ourselves in San Diego, we're going to have water reuse. I know that's going to be very controversial to a lot of people, but water security is going to be, and has been in San Diego in the past, but in the future it's going to be even more important. Klaus, tell us about water.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I certainly want to, like everybody else, thank you and, of course, the distinguished guests here on the panel that we can do this tonight. And I think the segue that Mike just did is really what I would like to talk about is water just simply sustains our life. And while we do forget that usually on a daily basis, we open the faucet and water comes out. We use fixtures in the restroom and they have water. We use the garden hose and it uses water. We have it still available. But I think I'm probably the one who doesn't have a myth, and that simply is, if you don't have water, you perish. That's not a myth, but we're forgetting it. And leaning onto what Mike has said too, is it is just simply too important to forget what water does for us. And before food or shelter and anything else is we do need water. What I'm certainly also taking from the panel here is the biggest challenge will be to change perception. And changing perception does take time, but I think too, somewhere in certain things, we're running out of time. Maybe just to put things in a nutshell, what potable water do we have available? We really only have about 3% of all the water in the world, and you saw the wonderful pictures of the globes, and it's all blue and there's all this water, but only 3% is really potable. But
When
it
you say
also,
potable, what does that mean?
I mean, drinking water. We cannot drink the water out of the Pacific Ocean. We have to clean it up somewhere. So streams that have sweet water, potable water, that's really the water that we can consume without harming ourselves. Next slide, please. Just again, put it in a nutshell, where is this water coming from? Be it ice caps, lakes, rivers, snowmelt, surface water, rain, aquifers, all of the above is where we have water available. However, how do we take care of them? If you wouldn't mind just going back to that. And I think that's where partly the stewardship comes from, partly the thought or the thought process changing comes from, is that we keep these natural sources of water in a condition that we can use them without spending money or other efforts really to get them to the point that we can drink them. If you just think about with our aquifers, we've been drawing down aquifers in this country to a point where we could not replenish the aquifers.
What's an aquifer?
What is an aquifer? We do have surface water that we all see, but then we do have water underneath the earth. That is water that has accumulated over millions of years. It is pristine, clean water. Once we're running out of surface water, we're looking for water other places, which are aquifers. But an aquifer replenishes at a much, much, much slower rate than surface water ever can. Because if you think if it is raining, it becomes surface water, and then slowly it goes into the aquifers. But now we're drawing water out of the aquifers, and we have huge other problems. We have structural problems, really. For example, in Texas, where aquifers have been drawn down so much that the surface, the earth over them, is starting to crumble. So misusing or overusing resources brings other not so apparent problems with them. And if you wouldn't mind going to the next one, because this is, of course, where water is used. I think we're all familiar with that. The next slide, please. Again, just to bring that, to take hold of what Mike has said, how important really is water. If you think about that, right now, at this point in time, about 1.2 billion people in the world do not have access of water today. That is a tremendous amount of people. But in about another 8 years, that number will almost triple. Okay? And then if you bring that into San Diego, it just really means we're not going to have it. So what are we going to do? Then not having water brings other problems with it, from illnesses to sanitation problems, because if you do not have the water, then you have sanitation problems in terms of carrying the waste away and so forth. As a first world country, and our responsibility to other countries is, if we're asking others to share, they will ask us to share more. And that's another thing on a not just local situation, but on a neighborly situation with other countries, or even continent problems. We do know, if you wouldn't mind please going to the next one, that we have problems with countries that keep water from another country. Now, we do have wars. There might not be wars that you're reading about or seeing on TV, but those are wars that have been going on for years, sometimes centuries, and they will come to bear in the next 100 years. Now, it sounds like a lot of doomsaying here, but I think what it leads to simply to is, what solutions do we have? Maybe just to give you another idea, I'm sorry, just one back, please. To realize for us, in the state of California, on average, we pay about $5.50 per 1,000 gallons of water and sewer. I'm saying water and sewer for the simple reason is you pay for the water that comes in, but you also need to pay for it to be treated on the outside. What comes in goes out. And as it turns out too, water, the water part, the clean water part, is usually less costly than the treatment, the waste part. And we forget that. So we really have two things that we do need to consider. It's
Would
the
you
fresh water,
say that one more time?
that the water, the cost of the water, of the clean water that comes in, is actually less costly than the cost to treat it. Yeah? Now, treatment, you had mentioned reclamation before and so forth, so we can take it to other cleanliness. But just even to carry it, and if we have this building here, the water that comes into this building is used and goes out, needs to be paid for on the front side, needs to be paid for on the back side.
Can you walk us through just when we talk about reclamation and getting the water through our system recovered and then back and usable again? Can you just walk us through that just a little bit, that process?
Sure, absolutely, and maybe if I could preface that with one, I think really by now important number. Of all the electricity we use in the state of California, 19% right now is used for water conveyance. That means, so that we have water in this building here, it takes pretty much 19% of the energy that we use in the state. That kind of a correlation has not really been made until shortly. And the same thing for gas, and gas actually is a higher percentage, it is 23%.
What do you think the implication of that is?
Well, I think water conservation makes sense. I think it's just as simple as that. But to answer your question, we do have naturally occurring water resources, but we need to draw them in order to be able to convey them, bring them to the cities, wherever they are located. That is a cost. There is a cost to bring them in, be it pumping, again, using energy. Then we bring them into our water facilities so that we have them filtered, that we all know we can have potable water, so that we don't think we have dirty water that comes into our faucet. Then, of course, we use it. We either drink it, we wash dishes with it, whatever we do. And then it goes into the drain. And that's usually from our intelligence standpoint, we say, it's gone, I don't need to think about it. But that's really, in my mind, too, where part of the problem really starts, is that you do have to now treat it. So it now goes into the drain. From the drain, it goes into the main. From the main, it goes into the wastewater treatment facility. And the wastewater treatment facility is this large, sometimes smelly place that we know when we drive along the freeway. It is hugely costly to operate. We do use a lot of chemicals to treat, one, the raw sewage, two, whatever else we all threw down there. And now we want to bring this water up before we even either can pump it out into the ocean. I think it's about 2 or 3 miles. 5, okay, better yet. Or we try to recycle it, make use of it through a primary or secondary or tertiary treatment, that it can go back to be reused, let's say, for irrigation on golf courses. Coming back maybe to changing perceptions, and I think that was really pretty much the whole idea here tonight too, is we can clean water up, used water, wastewater. We can clean it up so that we can drink it again. But the perception is out there, and a couple of years ago there was this notion out there, from Coke to poop. You know, I mean, this is, or from poop to Coke. You know, we can really, if we have the energy, we can make this water last and we can reuse it, especially if we're running out of resources. If you wouldn't mind the next one, just quickly, to other countries certainly have less cost on water, but that is the interesting thing, is while their cost is less, is they don't have the availability. And I actually had somebody in Mexico tell me that they have the most expensive water. And I said, what do you mean? What are you saying? He says, I'm paying a water access fee, and I open up the faucet, and I don't have water coming out. Just think about that for a second. Yeah? Those are just things that are, at this point in time, not part of our reality, but they really are part of the reality of, at this point in time, 2/3 of the world. And I don't want to be a doomsayer. All I wanted to do is, this is what's out there, and we actually can do something about it. So benefits of water, real quick, of course, sanitation. Water is growth. Can be population growth, it can be agricultural growth, it can be economic growth. With economic growth, of course, comes a tax base for the cities. And therefore, we do want to have a reliable source of water, as we do want to have a reliable source of electricity. If we have both, we will have growth and we'll attract businesses. If we don't either have both or one of them, we are losing or cannot even establish a base. And that's always that question too, how much do we want to have of each in terms of growth or sustainability? But I really do believe we can have both, because water conservation is pretty much the least expensive way of sustaining what we have. Problems that we have, of course, are in terms of water infrastructure funding shortfalls. And it unfortunately takes emergencies like the bridge coming down in Minneapolis that everybody says, oh my God, what are we doing with our infrastructure? And now we'll run out and we'll fix up all the bridges. Well, if you think about it, the water infrastructure in the city of New York, just to use that, is over 110 years old. And since the 1970s, they know there will be one major breakdown of that infrastructure. And they know since the 70s too, that if only one part of the city fails, there will be for months no water to certain areas. So we know that. Yeah? And it's not necessarily, I don't say this, it really is anybody's fault. It is just we develop things slowly, we finally find out things slowly, we can fund it only slowly, but those are just now things that have been happening for the last 100 years, and the urgency is just higher today than it was ever before. For example, in order to even find more sites for dams in this country where we can store water, the primary and secondary areas are gone because there are already dams with water behind them. So if we're trying to collect more water for the future, we don't really have the sites anymore because they're seismically not stable. They're in areas that are so far outside that it would just cost tremendous amounts of money to bring the water to other places. So we've used already the first couple of places up that we have. We do have, of course, certain conflicts, be they that we read about or that we don't read about in various states here. We do have the international conflicts we talked about. If you just think about Saudi Arabia, they use about 3 times the amount it receives in rainfall a year in terms of water. And so what Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries have done, of course, they've gone through desalination, but desalination has another problem. At least at this point in time, it uses a lot of energy. Yeah? And you're very vulnerable because that is what happened in Kuwait. The first thing that Saddam Hussein went at was the desalination plants. Therefore, the people didn't have any water. And as strange as that might seem, those are the things we have. And Mike had mentioned that too, just even our water resources here. It doesn't have to be necessarily a desalination plant. Everything as such today is vulnerable. And so we need to make ourselves the least vulnerable that we can be. Yeah, I mean, just the Beijing Olympics are coming up. I don't know if you know that or if you have read that. But there are such big problems in Beijing right now for the Olympics that most probably a lot of the population in Beijing will not have water for more than an hour or 2 a day just to accommodate the Olympics and the foreigners that are coming. Now, that can possibly be or can be done in Beijing. It couldn't be done here. Okay? So that's another thing, too, is that we please value what we have and what we can afford and what we hope all to keep going. Thank you. Just, again, for the audience here, for the viewers at home, just to put some numbers on there, what we do and what we use on a daily basis, and what actually can be saved by As we're washing hands, if we don't turn the faucet off, might be 1.5 gallons. If we're brushing teeth, we let it run, it's 4.7 gallons. While shaving, we look at ourselves, but we let the water run, 10.7 gallons. And if it's hot water, it's even more costly. No? Thank you. Dishwashing, 30 gallons. However, we have done, and I think that's the positive that I would really like to say, is we are a country that sometimes might, or we think that we might be a little bit late, while other countries have done a lot more. But I really, truly like to think in regards to water conservation, boy, if we get hold of things, we do it fast and we do it right. And I'd like to honestly commend the city here and also the county of San Diego, having been being part of very, very strong water conservation efforts, and not just being part of it, but really also putting their money where their mouth is in regards to rebates. The city has given rebates from toilets to urinals, to pre-rinse spray nozzles for restaurants, for other things that you can use on a daily basis. I mean, because again, too, the correlation has been made between water and money. That water conservation can save money, can save infrastructure, can save maintenance. And so I'd really like to commend the city and the county for that. In regards to maybe a myth is when the federal government said early on in the early 90s that low-flow toilets that have been used in foreign countries, we now need to do this too. And the manufacturers were actually forced into compliance to it, but the product technology wasn't necessarily there. You know, it still lingers on. This is now 15 years later, basically. People say, well, a low-flow toilet doesn't work. But I actually like to use what you had said, Rob, is we don't have to give up anything for water conservation. If you really think about it, if you have a restrictor on your faucet, and instead of 3.5 or 5 gallons, it's now 2.5, you don't give up anything. Water still comes out. If you have a low-flow toilet today, you don't give up anything because you do the same thing, it just flushes with less. You have urinals that don't use water today. You have a garden hose that uses instead of 8 and 9 gallons per minute, that uses 2.8 gallons. So you're not giving up anything. And that is another point in terms of changing perception, is you can do the same thing, but you can absolutely do the same thing with less. So I think the next big thing is really to make sure that the education is there, that we can accept new product, new technologies, but of course they always have to do some of the following things. It's a little bit tough to read, but that the products are code compliant, because we want to make sure that sanitation and the health of the population is well guarded. That of course the companies that come out with new products do have the service to bring it into the market. That usually the customer's comfort is not compromised, and I think we've seen that in some of the conversations that were here. And that, of course, somewhere the correlation is made that it also can either save money or it can make money. And in the end, if it has a positive cash flow, I think people will look at it. And the audience here or at home too is, if we turn off the lights, we can save money. If we turn off the water, we can save money. It does make sense on a daily basis. So I've taken some of these things already up front. I think I'd like to, the earlier UN Secretary Kofi Annan, I think his wording might be a good closing sentence. What is needed along with fresh water is fresh thinking. We need to learn how to value water. And I think beyond anything else, it's simple to do, and on the other hand, it can be done.
Klaus, thank you. We're going to go over a little bit, so I've got some questions here, and I want to ask them quickly and then give our panelists an opportunity to respond. Why isn't San Diego strongly promoting a rapid transition to renewable energy? And all these come from Jack Flynn, who we really appreciate the fact that he wrote these out. Why isn't San Diego strongly promoting a rapid transition to renewable energy?
Wow, sorry about that. Well, you know, there's this symbol behind you, Semper Vigilans, remember from our Latin from high school, always vigilant. I think it would probably mean, if we were being real with each other, Semper Inertia. You know, we don't have to. And part of it is we don't have to, and part of it is we don't know that there are these options out there. Like I told you, this car, faster than a Porsche, but it's all powered by solar. We just haven't been presented with the options, and we haven't had to switch. Well, part of the reason I moved back here to San Diego, I was living in Maui, life was good, but part of the reason I moved back here was I was amazed that a city of this size was so lugubrious. I don't get to use that word very often.
What does that mean?
So, imagine the sloth at the San Diego Zoo that just wasn't really moving. And, you know, we called ourselves America's finest city because we lost, what was it, the Super Bowl, and it feels good. It's a great city. I love our city.
That was a Republican convention.
I wasn't going to go there. That's right. We lost that. And, you know, we've got a lot of great things here, but we're sort of living off of this capacity. We're sucking up and using it, just like the freeway that was crowded when I came here. It was great in the 50s, great in the 60s, whatever, when it was first built, but we're living off of this image that we can continue to live on fossil fuels. And I'm just trying to say, hey, there's even faster cars that are solar powered. We haven't had that kick in the butt.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it comes down to choice. I mean, everything, actually, that we've been talking about today comes down to choice. Politics and activism can only go so far. The consumer dollar has the biggest effect on the shifts that happen throughout our economy and throughout our culture. State of California, as a ratepayer, I can't choose to buy renewable power. I lived in Portland for a few years, and
Why is that?
I don't know why. They haven't given us a choice. State of Oregon requires any private utility to give ratepayers an option to buy renewable energy, which the utility is required to purchase. The more the utility is required to purchase, the more that is produced. The more that it's produced, the less expensive it becomes, the more it's comparable and competitive to traditional methods of power out there. And that's the key. And that's why the cost of wind energy has actually dropped tremendously, and at its face value is almost is pretty close to being competitive to coal. Unfortunately, we have subsidies going to the most finite and most destructive sources, which common sense tells you not to do.
Come on up. Go ahead. Come on.
Michael, I have
Sure.
one point on what the city can do. The number one barrier to entry in everything that's been discussed here tonight is I don't have a box to check. When I stand in front of your permitting counter and I look at that poor city civil servant who's desperately trying to find a way to help me do my thingy, and it doesn't say it in the code, and there isn't a provision in the code that says, well, if I have this thingy that's not in the code, this is what I do. Every bit of what has been discussed here tonight dies at fast.
No, that means you got to put it in the code. Everybody that wants to answer a question, ask a question, and we obviously are not going to have time for everybody, but come on up here real quick, and we're just going to try to roll through them. And go ahead, sir. Ask your question.
Thank you very much for having this. I just wanted to respond to your question, to Jack's question, why can't we buy renewables? I called SDG&E and I said, can I tag my bill and direct some of this bill to renewable energy specifically? And finally I got through someone who could answer this question. They said the PUC would not let us, SDG&E, do this. And I don't know why.
Do you have any answer, Mike?
If they wanted it done, it would get done.
All right. Next.
SDG&E. And again, it sometimes comes up as if we've done these forums before and we talk about SDG&E, and there are things they should do differently. They do things right, and Mike Wiggins was talking about some of those things. You know, we run into problems as a consumer, as the city as well. The city is the second largest consumer of energy in this county, but we have big disincentives for us to deploy solar systems, cogen systems. It's harder for business and government customers to do it than it is for Rob in his house. So there are a lot of ways that those policies could be better.
I think that SDG&E is trying to become more socially responsible, but, you know, whereas I think before this was a matter of choice, now it's a matter of absolute mandate. It's not a choice anymore. Go ahead.
My name is Linda Flournoy. I actually have a company, Planning and Engineering for Sustainability. I'd like to thank you for what you're doing. I'd like to thank all of you. And I'd like to ask the audience real quick if there's anybody else working in green areas, what they consider sustainability. Is there anybody else here that's working? That's what I wanted you to see, Mike.
Great.
How many of us...
The audience at home,
actually...
the audience at home that we have about maybe 100, 125 people here, and that I would say the overwhelming majority raised their hands, which is really great.
Right. I could say several things I want to, but maybe I'll just go back to with Lisa's talk. It's especially important as we go forward, I think, to look at the system of the San Diego region, that we aren't just a series of problems, that we need to look systematically. I read a thing today that says most political decisions today are trying to solve problems caused by solutions to earlier problems. And it's because we were taking a short term and a narrow view.
That's what Toynbee said, the historian said.
It
that
may be.
That was the cycle of world history is one set of problems results in solutions, and then embedded in those solutions is the next cycle of problems.
So as you go forward, and especially working with the university on your general plan and others, I'd like to strongly encourage you to make sure you bring in enough people and take enough time up front to really look at the integrated nature of the region and how those solutions might play off of each other. You can gain tremendous financial advantages, time advantages. And these guys are all nodding, so I think you'll see that.
No, you're right. I think that's an excellent insight. You know, one of the four things that Eleanor Roosevelt said about leadership is that we have to see the interdependence of these things, and I think that's what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Next.
Hi, I'm Jay Corrales. I just wanted to respond to one of Michael's questions regarding what the city can do to promote green building. I want to throw something out on the table, and that's a Green Building Expedite program, which would shorten permitting periods for developers who are doing projects that meet certain green criteria, so whether that be certification or whatnot.
That's a good idea. You know, one of the things that happened during World War II, and right now I'm doing a lot of reading about how we geared up and mobilized our industrial capacity to basically put that to the service of our production needs for the war. And it was amazing. Do you know that for the Manhattan Project, and I'm not obviously talking about nuclear bombs right now, but for the Manhattan Project, there were 500,000 people working on that project, and that it represented a footprint that was as large as the entire production that was used to produce cars before the war. And no other nation was able to put forward that level of commitment. And that's what it's going to take. It's going to take that type of commitment. Of course, San Diego played a major role in producing what we needed to have to produce to meet the problems of World War II. Thank you.
Michael, could I?
Sure. Of course.
Sir, what you're asking for, you would be referred to as a special interest group. As an environmentalist and a pretty active one, I would look at you and say, in North County, you, Mr. Developer, coming into my area, asking to expedite your housing development because it's green, would require the state and my community to bypass I don't know how many environmental laws that our society has deemed important. Endangered species, air quality, traffic, these kinds of things. The challenge that you run into when any sector of the community asks for special considerations, and this is the big challenge that your whole law office spends God only knows how much time sorting through, is how do you balance these things? And the way that I would recommend that the industry look at this is to say, how can I get a win-win? The pie doesn't have to be cut so that somebody loses. This whole effort of sustainability and renewable energy can be done so everybody wins. And if you can find that solution, you find the shortcut.
Hold on a second, because I'm going to try to give everybody a chance to say something, and we're going to run out of time here because we're going to have to be out around 8:15. So go ahead, come on up, come on up.
And I just want to mention that these Green Building Expedite programs are in other cities of the state, so
Okay,
you
thank
can
you.
look at other cities.
Okay, good. Okay, come on up and give us a short blast.
Hi, my name is Julia Dash, and I'm with an organization called San Diego Roots Sustainable Food Project.
And my name is Kate Hughes. I'm with another agency for urban ag called San Diego Food Not Lawns.
And And we had some questions about food and farming. One in particular was what kinds of things are businesses and government thinking about in terms of food security in San Diego County. It feels like a lot of these issues kind of come together here when we talk about food and farming. How are we going to support an infrastructure to support local sustainable food system in San Diego? We think about water, we think about development, land access, all sorts of things. So that's one question.
Okay.
And a part two, just before the question's answered, to reference your concern before about the general plan, it's something we've certainly looked at in relationship to food security. And the American Planning Association this past year put out a guide specifically on how to integrate food security into the general plan, such as incentivizing local procurement for city governments or schools.
Great. We're going to use that as the answer to the first question. And let's go ahead and raise your next question, and because I want everyone to have a chance. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. My name is Brian Pease. I think San Diego is very fortunate to have City Attorney Mike Aguirre, who's so committed to the environment.
Okay, but don't say that anymore because I don't want you to get your point across.
I just wanted to mention a topic that's not usually brought up when talking about the environment, and that's the effect that, although I think it's the most important issue when you actually look at it, is the effect that a plant-based diet can have on protecting the environment, and the fact that animal agriculture is the #1 polluter of water. It's the #1 user of water. It's horribly inefficient to filter protein through an animal so that then you can eat the animal's flesh. And I like all the myth busting and saying that we don't have to give anything up, and that's how it is with a plant-based diet. Actually, the biggest myth that's out there is that you can't get protein from plants. I've been on a plant-based diet for 13 years, and I've eaten greater variety of food having made that transition than I did before, and I don't feel like I've given anything up. And also global warming, the United Nations just came out with a report showing that animal agriculture actually contributes more to global warming than vehicles do. So I just wanted to throw that out there, and I'm going to hand some flyers out in the hallway that just ask people to reduce their meat consumption.
And that's good. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. That was good insight. Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Don Christensen. I live in Carlsbad, which hopefully will be the site of one of the largest seawater desalination plants in the world within the next few years, if it clears the California Coastal Commission. Coastal Commission bounced the application back 4 times. It will be going before the actual Coastal Commission decision makers in the middle of November. Clarify a couple of things. There was a study done that I saw a few months ago that shows the amount of electrical energy used by state-of-the-art reverse osmosis membranes used in seawater desalination is just a bit more than the cost of electrical power needed to pump water from Northern California. So the electrical thing is less and less of an issue. A couple other things. There's been a lot of talk about distributed energy generation. Good thing. I think we should focus on distributed water generation as well.
What do you mean by that? What is that?
Well, we had a slide that showed existing water sources, aquifers, river streams, snowmelt. What we need is new water sources. Taking water from the ocean, seawater desalination is a new water source. Also, atmospheric water generation, basically dehumidifiers with ability to clean up the water. The Navy, I saw one of those for the first time a couple days over at the convention center. Navy hosted this large show. There's a Canadian company that had atmospheric water generators on site, and even in the air-conditioned convention center, they were pulling water out of the atmosphere.
Thank you very much. Excellent.
Don't
points.
forget hydrogen fuel cells also create water.
Okay, and what's a hydrogen fuel cell? Never mind. Go ahead.
Thank you all. My name is Skip Freilich. I'm with the California Center for Sustainable Energy. Wonderful. And we provide free design services for energy efficiency and renewables, just like SDG&E. And I'm happy to announce a new program that we've just rolled out for sustainable solar systems. We have rebates available for a limited time, roughly $1,000 per solar water heating system. That's on top.
Well, how does the public find their way to you?
Go to our our website, energycenter.org.
Energycenter.org.
And I challenge everybody here to pick up a brochure and check that out because it's a great opportunity. It's added to the federal tax credit.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Come up, sir.
Good evening. I'm Marv Lyons. Michael, a few months ago,
there was a program, evening program at the Natural History Museum.
Right.
And there was a gentleman by the name of Ron Sims, who was manager for the King County, which includes Seattle. And when he took office, he had the university do a study as to what the community would be like in 20 years. And he used that projection as a base for a lot of major things. And Lisa, what's her name? Emily Young, the San Diego Foundation, do you know about that? Committed to funding that.
Yeah, we're working with them on it.
Excellent. Fantastic. Also, and I've been working on, partly it's been influenced by your work, Lisa, an idea of a green challenge. And I won't go into it in depth, but I will leave the information here. The idea would be to get champions for 12 different areas, very much the kinds of things you're covering, to take a responsibility within a given period. It becomes like a game, but focused toward a change, real change in the community and change in mind space.
Okay.
So that people would commit to making real changes within a 3-month period. If they accomplish a change, they get a reward, and we continue. So, and you use the media to support the things so that people are not only shift in the real, getting cars off the road, for example, real changes there, but also having people change their consciousness and mind space. So I will
Thank you.
leave these.
We'll leave that with Jeff right here. He'll take it from you. Thank you very much. Right there. Yes, hi.
I'll hand it that way. Hi, I'm Kathy Kean. I'm with the San Diego County Bicycle Coalition, and yay! Thank you. And we're environmentally responsible. But I wanted to talk just for a minute about, Mr. Aguirre, you've never been one to shy away from a politically touchy subject.
Oh.
And there's an opportunity to be vocal right now. We don't have to wait for, we need to redo our plans, we need to redo this or that. Sandag right now is doing the regional transportation plan for the next 30 years for this county. We're spending too much on the single occupant vehicle. We're not spending enough on transit and bike and walking.
So what do you want us to do?
I want you to get the city of San Diego to write a letter to Sandag and say, we're not doing it right. Go back and do it right.
Well, I don't know if I get the city to do it, but I can get the city of San Diego attorney to do that. If you want to, you write the letter and I'll sign it.
Okay.
Okay, there you go.
Thank you.
Next.
Hello, Michael and
Hi.
distinguished panel. I don't know if are you aware of the San Diego Regional Sustainability Partnership? It's a partnership that was started last fall. It includes a lot of the major employers in the county as well as the military. And
Wonderful.
If you need,
Tell us more.
If you need further information, it'll take quite some time. We're
Okay.
going through.
Do you have a website?
Yes, there is. And what I'll do is I'll make sure that you.
Well, what's the name? Tell us the name of the
The
website.
San Diego Regional Sustainability Partnership, and it includes the military, it includes many of the major employers.
So if they just Google that, then
They should be able to find
Okay,
it.
so it's the San Diego
SDRSP.org.
SD
San Diego Regional Sustainability Partnership, SDRSP.org. So there are, I believe, 8 committees on there representing different facets of pretty much everything that we're doing up here, and I'm on the
Absolutely.
Transportation Committee in particular.
Absolutely. We've been working for several months developing standards for the entire county. Certainly like to have the city to participate in that.
Well, we'll make sure that we get somebody over there to do that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Jesse Thomas. I'm a private citizen of San Diego. I would like to ask that the person there where the government is subsidizing your solar panels, if you would kindly give that money back to the taxpayers and pay for the panels yourself. And if you can't do that, then that means that the private then the solar panels doesn't pass the muster for private enterprise.
I'd respectfully respond that the oil industry receives far more subsidies than the solar industry.
Well, then the solution is to obviously get government completely out of this hole.
I would have no
in
problem
the
with that.
first place. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
It's a theory called free market environmentalism, that if there are actually no subsidies, the actual market is going to gravitate towards that which is most sustainable and least destructive. That's what we're all
In other
trying to
words,
accomplish.
okay, so hold on. Come on back up. Okay, let's take your idea, because at first I thought it was a little bit off-putting to me, but I think you have an interesting idea. Come on back up to the microphone. what we're basically saying is this, and see if you agree with this. If we do away with all the subsidies, then in all things being equal, that there will be more use of the sustainable than, let's say, the fossil fuel because of the subsidies. Do you agree with that? Would you agree with that concept or not?
Yes, and I actually know somebody personally who drives on a regular basis from San Diego to Arizona, and he gets oil from restaurants and puts it in his truck. And I said, well, hey, that's great, but I'll bet the feds don't like you. He says, well, as a matter of fact, they don't. They're trying to sue the guy that put the engine in the car for unlawful conversion. Obviously, if the government isn't getting their tax money.
Is conversion unlawful now?
Well,
The
it's
idea
another
is you're
big
not paying
term.
gasoline taxes if you use a
Right,
biodiesel.
okay, I got it. Okay, good point. So we're kind of locked into the current system, so it's going to take a lot of transitioning, out of the current system and with new tax structures and new ways of raising revenue. Excellent point. Thank you very much. Yes.
Michael, on that one point, just very quickly, Wall Street, which is what drives most of these industries, is the reason for the incentive. It's not the taxpayer. Biomass energy in this state was subsidized in the 80s because the state wanted it. Wind is subsidized because the feds wanted it. Solar is subsidized for the same reason, to stimulate spending of money from Wall Street at no risk to the people providing.
To get things going.
Right. If the city wants to drive this economic engine and take those types of incentives out, you're going to have to address the basic way that people raise money to start companies and build facilities and manufacturing plants. And that tackling of that infrastructure is something that the city's never tackled, the feds have never tackled, the state has never tackled, because it's an entrenched system. So the trick is, in the incentive game, is to find ways to put incentives in place that have sunsets, just like term limits.
That is the way they're doing it in Japan, where the subsidies are now to zero for solar. And I think that's great. Japan really got going with solar. They had huge subsidies, now they're zero. Same with Germany. I like that.
That's a way to manage it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I had just to comment along those lines on the same subject. Sustainability is the only thing that's sustainable, like that really works. So everything else must be being helped along in some artificial way. That's the way I look at it. So,
Okay.
my name is Tad Simmons. I'm with Green Source Partners. We're putting together a private equity fund for sustainability in San Diego. I'm also chair of the Society of Automotive Engineers in San Diego, and helped initiate the Home Depot solar program so that all of you could go to Home Depot and buy solar power for your home. And I just wanted to comment on a couple of things. One thing is a big opportunity for solar that I think is being missed is the commercial solar power, commercial photovoltaics. With the rebates that are available.
What do you mean
and
by
incentives.
commercial? What would you mean by
All the big flat buildings that we have, the manufacturing, the full-service lease buildings, City Hall. Yeah, and parking structures. When it's commercial, it qualifies for certain rebates and tax credits, and the payback can be in a few years. And then you have free electricity.
We're not going to, this isn't going to be the first time we meet and the last time we meet. This is just, we're going to get these things going here. This is a good way. What the people of San Diego at home, because I know we're running out of time, what they need to understand is that we have a great audience here, but this is a great audience of leaders in this area. There's almost everybody here in one way or the other is deeply involved, and this is very encouraging for our city and just the sorts of ideas that have come forward. I haven't heard a bad one yet.
And one more thing about green buildings. I think you touched on it, but the designers and architects, those are the people that make the decisions about what's going to go into a building. Those are things that offer the homeowners the options. And I think if there's any way we can incentivize or help educate the designers of these structures so that they offer more choices, so that they don't, really what I see more often is they resist these things.
Well, I think
because they know what they know and they want to keep doing
Right.
the same thing.
I think we
so.
can help too with the way we draft the mandatory codes.
Good.
Let's go to the next lady. We've got a couple more folks. Let's get through the rest and then we'll get out of here. And I really appreciate Channel 24 hanging on there, so let's move as quick as we can.
Hi, my name is Rosalind Hasselbeck, and there's 3 water issues that I wanted to bring up, and kind of really from the viewpoint of residential homeowners. So Two have to do with water usage, and I forget the exact statistic, but I think about 40% of potable water use at this point is for irrigation purposes, which is crazy. We don't need to do that.
Pause 1 second. Claus, is that about right?
Is that right? Okay, thanks.
So, yeah, it's a large, I'm sorry?
We are drafting a new landscape water ordinance as we speak. Today, I was in a meeting on that. We are making a whole new set of rules for landscape, and there's also the low impact.
One of our distinguished guests has said that there's going to be a new landscape ordinance that's being drafted by, drafted by whom? The city? Okay, so the waterconservation.com, waterconservationsummit.com. Okay, all right. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so my thoughts were, one, I know that this is something that's very big in third world countries and becoming more common maybe thought of here is the idea of rainwater catchment systems. It's a no-brainer to use the rainwater that you have coming off your own roof to water your garden. That way it's decentralized, there's no longer, you're not vulnerable. You can't attack that. People are
Is that
collecting it at
something
home.
for, in our green construction, is that something that we see?
Yes, capture of rainwater is something that's part of the USGBC LEED standards, and it's I've seen it proposed on a couple of projects recently in this area.
Okay, that's a great idea. Let's go to our last three so we can get everybody in, okay? Did you have two more ideas, okay?
One is, the second thing is making it easier to get permits for gray water, which may also be in that, so that you
Okay.
can use your laundry water. The third one is with regards to stormwater runoff, which is one of the U.S. Green Building Council points for commercial buildings is stormwater quality and quantity, giving incentives for residential homeowners for increasing pervious material, which will allow water infiltration which can be done by, I forget your name, Joshua? Fewer parking places,
Right.
fewer driveways, and also by planting green roofs, which is a
Every
business
one of
that
those
involves-
ideas is a great idea. Let's go, let's keep going. Let's go quickly if we can, just because we're going to run out of
Hi.
time, and I appreciate the fact
Sure.
I haven't heard a bad idea yet all night. Go ahead.
My name is Chuck Brands, and I am the chair of the Committee on the Environment with the local chapter of the American Institute of Architects.
Oh, wonderful.
And also with an organization just recently founded called United Green, which stands for the Grassroots Environmental and Energy Network. And our organization has joined with Lisa Schaefer and her Environment and Sustainability Initiative to actually produce an event on October 29th,
Where's that gonna be?
featuring Ed Masry, and it's going to be at UCSD's Price Center, Ed Masry of Architecture 2030.
So it's on October 29th at what
October
time?
29th, Monday night, 6 p.m.
6 p.m., okay.
And Architecture 2030 refers to the concept of having net zero energy and carbon neutral buildings by that time. And all buildings coming off the drawing boards today having 50% reduction in net energy consumption.
What's a
and-
carbon neutral building?
A carbon neutral building is carbon neutral in operation. Essentially, no fossil fuels used
Okay,
in the
got it.
operational building. There's always going to be carbon, embedded energy and carbon in construction process. But, so anyway, it should be a great event, and you can get more information about that next week at the unitedgreen.org website, and we'll also, I think UCSD will also
Thank
have
you.
something
Thank you
there.
so much for doing that. We really appreciate it.
Sure.
We really do.
Thank
you.
Appreciate it.
General, yes.
Hi, good evening. Joe Vecchio, Chairman of Home International, a local group. We do educational events about climate change, and if you guys want to show up and be on the city council tomorrow and take over, I think this would be a great
I do
bunch
too.
here.
I was thinking the same thing myself.
But anyway, what I wanted to say was, I had heard landscaping, 50% of the water nationally goes for landscaping, not 40%. And one other point Klaus made, in the state of California, we use 19% of our electricity and energy to transport water. But in San Diego County, and this was told me by Linda Pratt from the city, it's 60%.
Wow.
So if we're still on the air at home, and I just want to encourage everyone, shut off the water when you shave and when you brush your teeth, and I think we'll be, that'll get us far ahead.
Thank you very much. Channel 24, we have two more speakers. Thank you. Go ahead.
Norm Allenby,
Hi, Norm.
ecological engineering in Massachusetts builds living machines that recycles water on site. And we think there's a horrific waste of water being thrown into the Pacific with the nitrogen, the phosphorus, and all those things that are utilized and should be used that we're just throwing away.
Norm, thank you very much.
Mike, you said you heard a lot of good ideas tonight, and I want to bring to the attention of the audience here that any idea that comes forward should be investigated thoroughly and done right. And the one proposal I heard tonight was the desal plant in Carlsbad. Look at that closely. Make sure that it's profitable and it's affordable and it takes into account the environment. There are organizations that are against some of the issues involved with that program. I happen to be involved with one of them. I won't make a political statement here, but,
No, but
just
that's a
do
good
your
point.
homework.
That's a good point, and I appreciate it. All right, that wraps it up. Let me just say for everybody that what comes out of tonight in the context of just where we are with the this whole Sun Road building and the, I would say, the departure of the development services head, or at least the person who oversaw the development services, there's a real opportunity for change in San Diego. You in this audience and you at home can make that change possible by making sure that your point of view, your support for a sustainable San Diego is known. We can change. We have it within ourselves to change. And tonight we have learned that we have the know-how to know where our leadership that's in this room is prepared to lead us, and I think San Diego is prepared to follow. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you soon.